For your tree weaving, you'll start out with a paper plate, and you're going to want to make 2 marks at the bottom of the plate here that are about 1 inch apart. Lucky for me, this plate that I'm using has some lines on it, and I'm just going to use those lines as a guide for making my marks. So I'm going to do 1 mark here, so just like a little line, and another mark there, and these are going to indicate where our tree trunk goes. It's about 1 inch apart, so if your plate doesn't have nice little lines like this, you can use a ruler. Now up at the top here, we're going to make 8 lines that are about 1 inch apart. Make sure they're kind of centered above the trunk lines. So I'm just turning my plate so I can center it a little bit more. So again, we're doing 8 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I was kind of going back and forth to make them a little more even. So if you need to double check, make sure you have 8 at the top and 2 at the bottom. That's what we need. It's going to be our tree branches. So next, you're going to grab your scissors and you're going to cut right on those little lines that you drew from the edge of the plate just right up to the flat part to make these little notches. So now I will refer to these as notches. Now you'll take a piece of yarn for your tree trunk. So pick a tree trunk color. I'm using this light brown yarn here. And you are going to start creating the warp strings of your loom. And you're going to start on the left side trunk notch. So one of the 2 notches at the bottom, the one on the left side, you're going to slip the end of the yarn through and onto the back. So there's this little tail hanging onto the back. And then you're going to secure that little tail down with tape. I'm going to call this left side notch the original notch because it's the first one that we put the yarn through. Now you're going to take your yarn and you're going to slip it through the first of the 8 notches on the left here. Then you're going to bring it just around the back of the plate to the notch right next to it. Then you're going to go down to that right side trunk notch and then back around to the original notch. From the original notch, you'll go up to the next empty notch, go around just the back here into the notch right next to it, down to the right trunk notch and into the original notch, up to the next empty notch, over to the one next to it, down to the right notch, and over to the original notch, up to the next empty one, over to the one next to it, down to the right notch, and through the original notch. We just completed a pattern. Now I'm going to turn my plate over. This is what your plate should look like on the back. Now we're going to take this excess yarn that's hanging out here, and we're just going to wrap it around the bottom of these strings to make the tree trunk. So you're literally just wrapping it around like a mummy. And you'll start to see your tree forming. The string I used was a bit long, so I'm not going to use all of it. So when my trunk looks good, I'm going to pick one of my branches here, and I'm just going to wrap and loop and tie a little knot with my extra string, and then do another one just to attach it, just like that. And then I'm going to cut off the excess string. So now your tree trunk is complete. And now you can look at your branches, and it's going to be time to weave. So we're going to be weaving over, under each tree branch, and we're going to be going back and forth from the bottom to the top. So here is the string I'm going to use to weave. It's called the weft string. I'm going to start with the first warp string here, my tree branches. I'm going to go under, over, under, over, under, over, under. It's a little tricky sometimes. Over. And now with this first row that I just did, I'm going to make sure it's on the bottom, and I'm going to pull, 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 pull until I have just a short little tail hanging out. Just like that. So always keep that little tail hanging out, and we'll get rid of that at the very end. So to make my second row, I'm going to start by going back the other way, and where I ended, the weft string is going over the warp string, so now I'm going to start by going under the warp string. So you always start a new row by going the opposite way that you ended up. So if you ended up under the string, you start by going over. If you ended up going over, you start by going under. It's a pattern. And then you pull, pull, pull once you get to the end. Now I'm going to start my third row. I stopped with the string going over, so I'm going to start it under. And I'm going to weave over, under, over, under, over, under, pull. Make sure that little tail's still hanging there. So again, we're weaving back and forth, left to right, right to left, whichever way you start. And we're starting each row the opposite way of how we ended the last one. So I'm going to keep weaving, and then I will show you what you should do when you run out of yarn and need to keep going. All right, so I am getting to the end of my weft yarn here, the yarn that I'm weaving with. So I'm just gonna try to go as long as I can with it, see where it stops. All right, stopped right about here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a new piece of string. I'm gonna go a couple warp strings back from where my weft string ended. And I'm just going to kind of pick up where I left off with the new string. So we're just gonna overlap a little bit here, and I'm gonna pull, pull, pull till I have a little tail hanging through. And then I can just continue on my way. So you don't have to tie anything. It'll all get woven in there as you go. So it's really easy when you need to change out your string. Just pick up where you left off, go like a few back from where the last one ended, and weave it right on in there. So here we are again, where I'm running out of string. So you can see the end. I'll get my new piece, and I'll go a couple back from where that end is, and I'll just stick it in the same way. I'll weave it all the way through this row here. And then I'll pull, pull, pull till I have a little tail. And that little tail is just gonna get woven, covered up as you keep weaving. So you don't have to worry about tying it or anything. So I'm just gonna keep going. I'm almost at the top here. It gets a little difficult once you're at the top and the warp strings start to get a little short. It's hard trying to squeeze the weft strings through, but you can get it. All right, I'm at the end of my last piece of yarn here, and I'm literally just gonna tuck it in behind. You don't have to tie it off. And then this little tail that we started out with originally, you can either cut it or you can just tuck it behind your tree. And there is my finished tree weaving.